All right, let's just jump straight into this explainer. We live in this crazy, hyper-visual digital age, right? From the second you wake up, you're scrolling through feeds, catching the 24/7 news cycle, and just absorbing thousands of images. We are constantly bombarded. But we rarely stop and ask, what are these visuals actually made of? Are they just capturing a fleeting, objective moment in the present? Or are they hiding some massive, profound temporal challenges? Today, we're going to dig into how we see, when we see, and why this is absolutely crucial for how we navigate the biggest global crises of our time.
So let me throw a foundational, kind of philosophical question your way. How do you take a picture of time? Take a second to really think about the mechanics of that. Usually when we look at an image, we assume we're looking at a frozen fraction of a second, a literal snapshot of reality. But what happens when the thing you're trying to capture is moving at a glacial pace over decades? Or, on the flip side, what if it exists millions of years in the past? We're going to challenge your basic assumptions today about what counts as visual evidence, and look at exactly how humanity manages to visualize things that are completely invisible to the naked eye.
For decades, the absolute gold standard for scientific truth was the instant photograph. Just take a look at this iconic 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing. When that shutter clicked, it was the ultimate triumph of the camera as an objective, undeniable witness. It was a single mechanical instant. Light bounces off the astronaut's suit, hits the camera's film, and boom, proof. For the longest time, if you could photograph it, it was real. But as you'll see, our scientific ambitions have grown way beyond just taking pictures of rocks on the moon.
Now, just think about the sheer mind-bending scale of what we're trying to do today. We aren't just looking at our own celestial backyard anymore. A few years ago, scientists decided to target something 55 million light-years away, the supermassive black hole at the center of the M87 galaxy. To wrap your head around that massive number, the visual data we're capturing started its journey to Earth millions of years in the past. Long before humans were even a blip on the radar, that light was traveling through deep space. So we're not talking about traditional photography anymore. This is basically time travel.
Here's the catch, though. A black hole, by definition, emits absolutely zero light. The gravity is so incredibly intense that nothing, not even a single photon, can escape. That meant scientists couldn't just build a bigger camera or a stronger lens. They had to completely reinvent photography to create what's called a composite data image. Rather than a single optical snap, this is a visual representation built by compiling, processing, and synthesizing massive computational datasets. It is, quite literally, an image built out of pure information.
And gathering that pure information, it turned into an epic high-tech detective story. To pull this off, they synced up 8 massive radio observatories across the globe to basically turn the Earth itself into a giant telescope. Over 4 clear nights, they pulled in a staggering 5 petabytes of data. And guys, 5 petabytes is so insanely heavy in digital terms that you couldn't just upload it to a cloud network. They literally had to pack physical hard drives into boxes and fly them on commercial airplanes to a central lab just to process them.
All of that massive logistical effort builds to this, the historic, mesmerizing reveal of the M87 black hole. But here's what you absolutely have to understand. This glowing ring is not a snapshot in the traditional sense. It's an algorithm's highly sophisticated synthesis of superheated gas falling into a dark void. It's a mathematical rendering of radio frequencies that's been carefully translated into colors so our human eyes can actually perceive and understand it as an image.
But they couldn't just click render and be done with it. Earth-based telescopes can only grab so much data due to weather, the Earth's rotation, and the insane distance. So the initial picture was completely incomplete. The scientists used this perfect analogy. They said trying to see the black hole with that limited data was like playing a piano with missing keys. You've got the foundational notes, sure, but there are massive holes in the melody. So how do you hear the whole song? You have to rely on incredibly complex systems to accurately fill in those missing pieces.
Okay, this is actually my favorite part. To test those algorithms and make sure they weren't just creating digital hallucinations, they used music. Specifically, they fed the algorithm a broken, stuttering, highly incomplete version of Vanilla Ice's hit song, Ice Ice Baby. Seriously, the algorithm had to analyze the incomplete frequencies, look at the structure, and piece the fragments together until that familiar underlying tune finally emerged. And that is exactly what the algorithms did with the fragmented black hole data. They found the logical visual patterns in scattered radio waves to reveal the final historic image.
Now, all of this brings us to a really profound and honestly unsettling contradiction. If we can sync up global observatories, fly petabytes of hard drives around the world, and write algorithms tested on 90s hip-hop to visualize an invisible black hole 55 million light-years away, why do we struggle so incredibly much to visualize the climate crisis happening right here, right now?
How is it that human ingenuity lets us see the invisible edges of the universe, but we are basically blind to the slow crisis happening in our own backyard?
Well, a huge piece of the puzzle comes down to a concept coined by scholar Rob Nixon called slow violence. Slow violence is about disasters that creep along at a glacial, almost imperceptible pace. We're talking months, years, or decades. Think toxic drift in our oceans or creeping deforestation. Because these crises completely lack that sudden, explosive action movie visual, they simply don't trigger the evolutionary alarm bells in our visually driven brains.
And this failure of our visual culture, it has massive, devastating real-world consequences. We're essentially living in an era of collective denial. Our politicians, writers, filmmakers, and artists are collectively failing to visualize this existential threat. Because climate change is so slow and subtle, our traditional ways of making images just fall flat. It's a fundamental crisis of imagination. We simply haven't invented the right visual language to make the quiet urgency of this crisis feel tangible to the general public. Which leaves us with this undeniable paradox. We actually do have terrifying photographic evidence, like this massive crack in the Antarctic ice shelf captured by a NASA flight. But sociological research shows that bombarding people with these doom and gloom photos totally backfires. Instead of sparking a global revolution or mobilizing communities, it just breeds a deep sense of dread. People look at the sheer enormity of the destruction and feel like the final deadline is already passed, causing an emotional shutdown rather than actual action. So we have to be super careful about the psychological impact of our visual culture if we want to survive. Traditional doom imagery inherently causes public paralysis and apathy. You see a burning forest and collectively think, it's too late, there's nothing I can do. But we have a vital alternative: new visual narratives. We desperately need images that provoke action and give us a sense of human agency. Visuals that don't just wallow in the destruction of the planet, but actively light up clear pathways for systemic change.
The bottom line is, we have to actively reimagine our entire visual world. We need to boldly acknowledge that traditional photography has major limits when it comes to slow-moving crises. Just like those brilliant astrophysicists combined time, space, and massive datasets to show us a black hole, we need to apply that exact same level of genius to synthesize the slow violence of our changing planet into urgent, empowering visual narratives. We have to consciously shift our collective gaze away from visual despair and move toward visual empowerment before it truly is too late. Which brings us to the big, lingering question to wrap up this explainer. Can we actually design images powerful enough to wake us up from our global slumber? It's a monumental, world-saving challenge for sure. But as we've seen today, human beings are incredibly, almost magically capable of visualizing the impossible when we focus our collective minds and technology on it. Our future might literally depend entirely on the images we choose to create today. Thanks so much for exploring this vital topic with me, and I challenge you to keep your eyes wide open to the unseen world around you.